Death Battle's now halfway through its 8th season, and it's going to be on break for a while. So with no new episodes for me to review for the next few months, let's take a look back and see what I think of the season so far. I've given each of these episodes their own solo reviews, but now that I've had more time to reflect on them all, which ones do I like more, which ones do I like less, and which ones have stayed the same? Well, mostly that last one. But let's see how they stack up compared to each other, as if me giving almost all of them completely different scores won't make it mostly obvious.
Why do we have 2 ears then if we only need 1? That's kind of sus.
Guys, I'm here to offer an apology. In my original review of the episode, I made a very slanderous claim regarding Blake vs Mikasa's track. Thundershroud is fucking amazing, and I'm so sorry that I said it was just pretty good back then. I will try and do better. Otherwise though, yeah, the rest of my review is still right on the money in terms of my current thoughts. It's a pretty boring episode to me. There's some really nice choreography at the cost of the animation looking janky as shit at some points, and the frame rate still really bothers me. I get that they wanted to animate on 2s, it's a neat experiment and I think it can work well when done right, but it just looks jarring to me whenever the characters' bodies are moving at different frame rates to the camera and their own hair. And when the change in poses isn't dynamic enough to make up for that, it just results in it looking even uglier to me. The writing also still sucks. Mika's voice performance by Francesca Kahlo is good, but lines like,
"Are those 2 sets of ears? She must have 4 times the hearing."
don't do them any favours. Blake also gets 2 reused voice clips and neither of them fit. She's inciting a fight while demanding to be left alone. She's heavily wounded but still very happy as she goes to fight a skyscraper-sized abomination. And the death is just so bad. I still can't look at this shot without laughing, and it sucks because I think it's a really cool concept. Though at least there's some ironic comedic value to be had with some of the episode, because every joke in the analysis either leaves me in complete bored silence or makes me audibly groan in pain. Boomstick making fart noises is just fucking painful. At least the dad jokes are over quickly when they come around, god damn. I mean, it's not all bad at least. There's still that one incredible looking silhouette shot, solid choreography, and a good emphasis on moving around in a wide open space. There's a moment of destruction that's pretty impactful in spite of its small scale, and there's a lot of good moments where Mikasa uses strategy to gain the upper hand. Actually, Mikasa's kind of the main character in this animation, probably because they couldn't get Blake's VA, but it's still neat that the Rooster Teeth show gave someone else the spotlight over their own character. I still don't like the episode, but at least it has enough redeeming qualities for me to not outright hate it. It's just a bit of a slog. DJ was bound to take an L eventually, you hate to see it.
I've got diplomatic immunity.
That's insane.
I still do not understand the hype behind Lex Luthor vs Doctor Doom. For me, seeing everyone praise this episode like the next coming of Christ over a lot of other stuff in this season is like walking into a really nice restaurant and seeing everyone popping off over plain white bread. The episode's fine, I don't think it's good, I don't think it's bad, I don't like or dislike it. But I've definitely grown somewhat jaded towards it. The animation is well done, but it's boring. I do not like how the fight constantly stops and starts for them to explain what they're doing at any given moment. I know people are gonna say, oh, it's in character, but like, I don't care. It's still boring, and I'm sure they can work in lines like that in ways that aren't as wordy while still keeping the action up. They made such a big deal about how this was longer than the last 2 episodes, and that is pretty much exclusively thanks to the several 20 or so second long pauses between each string of attacks. And the thing is, even if this was in character, they already made dialogue for Lex work before. Tony vs Lex has dialogue that feels both in character and doesn't disrupt the flow of the fight. Imagine if in that episode we got interactions like, you shouldn't have had all those crates lying around, Stark. It was way too easy to throw one at you to take you out. Actually, that crate contained my Hulkbuster armor, which is much physically stronger than my regular armor, so I am now going to use it as a means to overpower you. Or, my suit is losing power. What did you do? This is my Endosim suit, Lex. It has the ability to absorb energy, which I've used to depower your suit. This is over. Yeah, I'm definitely never taking up voice acting, good lord. What I'm trying to get across is that sometimes less is more. The only parts of the dialogue that stand out for me are Lex's one cool line, his unintentionally hilarious screaming, and Doom's last line being a cool concept, but not making any sense in the context that he says it. Everything else is either boring exposition or just worse versions of Doom's Marvel vs. Capcom quotes. Oh, and also that one line where Doctor Doom, one of the most intelligent humans and most powerful sorcerers in all of Marvel, who is more than well aware of Iron Man, was absolutely bewildered at the idea of Lex having a backup suit. The voice acting doesn't sell it for me either. Gianni did good as Lex, but Stephen Kelly as Doom sounds like they're just doing their Dracula performance again, which was a good performance for Dracula, but this voice doesn't fit Doom at all. For everything the episode gets right, it feels like it gets something else wrong to cancel it out. Apex of Doom's a fine track, it's atmospheric but painfully low energy. It's the American Phantom of this season. The hand-drawn stuff is incredible, but it's not used in any interesting ways. The analysis is phenomenally well edited, but the sound effects are genuinely annoying at points, and almost all of the jokes were groan-worthy. The foot dive scene was great, but it's been memed to the point where I am so sick of it. The death was pretty good, but the build-up and aftermath sucked. The backgrounds looked outstanding, but actually there are no downsides there, the backgrounds are just ridiculously good looking. It's an overall fine episode, but I still can't believe the Nemesis server was so up in arms over another generic forgettable Marvel vs DC fight. There was nothing to set this apart from other episodes of the same tier like Strange vs Fate and Flash vs Quicksilver. It's perfectly serviceable filler, but in a Legacy season that's not the title you'd want any episode to have. I'd honestly sooner go back to the highlight reel of my friends and I's reaction to the episode rather than the actual episode itself.
Faker.
After giving it more time to sink in and rewatching it a few more times since my initial review, I still really enjoy Shadow vs Ryuko, but there are a lot more things I have to talk about that I never mentioned in my review back in March, both positive and negative. Looking back at how Ryuko was characterized, I don't really like it. Her going after Shadow's head and getting pissy with Senketsu feels in character for earlier in the series, but not so much in terms of later on when she's got a better grip of her anger and grown a stronger bond with Senketsu. She feels uncharacteristically aggressive towards him for the entire battle, and she never shows any worry for him when he gets hurt or when they're about to die. Not a fan. That said, I did like most of the banter that she had with Shadow. I just wish there was more of it. Going off what I can remember of Shadow, it makes sense for Ryuko to do most of the talking and for Shadow to only really give one-word answers. Not sure if it's in character for him, but it just feels right, you know? Plus, Shadow's still able to make me laugh a few times in spite of not speaking much. I love the inclusion of him saying damn, and the Faker line never fails to make me smile. I wanted him to say wow what a ripoff initially, but I think Faker works better, since it's a less in-your-face callback to the Vegeta fight on top of referencing more than just a previous Death Battle episode. The Sayonara exchange at the end is also great, but I still stand by that I think it would have been better and more cathartic if Shadow was the one to say it. People say it's out of character for him to say I'm the coolest at the end, and I'm not super into the line myself, but it's also a line pulled directly from Sonic Adventure 2, so I'm not adamantly against it, I guess. The choreography is also pretty solid for the most part. I was curious as to how they'd make a sword-to-fist battle work, but they used Shadow's arsenal to allow for a lot more creativity in how he combats the scissor blades. I love the Chaos Control head kick, and the Black Doom sword spin attack was really cool. It's all made better by some really nice looking animation. The hand-drawn stuff is mostly really good, albeit some faces don't look great. And it all goes to Ryuko for some reason. Shadow is just cursed to always be left out whenever his opponents get hand-drawn stuff apparently. The effects and colour palette are visually appealing, and the sprite rigging lacks any moments that take me out of the fight completely like with half of the sprite fights last season. What did take me out of it a little though was the sound design. At some points it's good, and at others it's... Yikes. The track is a mixed bag for me. I re-listened to Chaos Unraveled a lot, but I can only say I really loved the chorus, which is excellent, but the more guttural points don't stick with me unfortunately. It complements the fight nicely all the way through though. Speaking of mixed bags, there's the ending. On one hand, it's visually stellar, with the effects and music helping create a really cinematic feel as the fight is taken to space. And I love the scene of Ryuko getting sent back down into orbit as a reference to the final episode of Kill La Kill. But on the other hand, everything after they go into their super forms feels a bit rushed. And the death is by far the weakest of Shadow's episodes. Him finally getting off that Chaos Blast doesn't feel nearly as cathartic as it should given the super small scale and painfully low energy line from him. I may hate Shadow vs Mewtwo, but to give it some credit, Shadow at least shouted Chaos Control as he was getting mind-wiped, shitty performance aside. The voice acting's mostly really good, but both Shadow and Ryuko do have some lines that feel a little lower energy than I would have liked. Ryuko also doesn't get some of her most iconic lines like life fiber synchronized Kamui Senketsu or scissor blade decapitation mode, which is sad because the fight feels a little incomplete without either of those. Senketsu's voice performance was great all the way through, but he also only had like 4 lines and didn't even get a death scream. And to close off, I'll briefly cover the analysis, which I enjoyed in spite of not really finding any of the jokes funny. These animated Whiz and Boomstick segments added absolutely nothing this time around. Also, Dummy wasn't even in the episode at all, and like with Venom vs. Krona, I didn't even notice until I rewatched it. I like him when he shows up, but I can't really say I miss him whenever he doesn't. But the rest of the analysis was still fairly enjoyable. I enjoyed seeing them cover Kill La Kill, and a more up-to-date Sonic analysis was nice to see. I know people are going to be upset that Shadow was downplayed to planet level, and Sonic stats is an argument I don't even want to get near, but realise that planetary Shadow was all they needed to justify a Shadow victory. Anything further would have been ghoulish overkill. I've talked way more about this episode than I planned to. TLDR, it's pretty good, but it's still a 7 out of 10 for me. Oh, also they didn't accidentally declare Ryuko the winner at the end, you hate to see it.
What did sandcastles ever do to you?
I don't know. I don't know.
As the match I was looking forward to the most all season so far, I'm gutted I can't put Steven vs. Star higher. My original review is still fairly up to date. This hasn't had as much time as the others for my opinion on it to change, given that it's one of the more recent episodes. It's still a really good episode that I liked a lot. The fight was overall very fun, with not a whole lot that really stands out as bad, but also not a whole lot that I consider exceptionally amazing outside of the transformation scenes. There is one thing I forgot to mention in my initial review though. Well, I didn't entirely forget it because it is in the script, so I either accidentally deleted that segment of audio or just somehow skipped it entirely. But it sounds like Ben and Chad were having an off day when they decided to record this. So many lines in the analysis are poorly delivered. Some have really low energy, some have a weird amount of emphasis put on certain words that don't make sense, and some have both. It makes the jokes I already didn't find super funny even less so. The only jokes I liked were the Godzilla Steven jokes and the cutaways, and the cutaways are pretty much exclusively for ironic enjoyment anyway. It sucks that this is one of the episodes that have the weakest voice acting in the analysis, because I think Kaden and Megami did really well voicing Steven and Star respectively in the fight. Megami probably had my favourite overall performance, since I generally prefer Star's higher energy to Steven's voice, but Kaden had easily my favourite individual line in the episode with Steven's transformation scene. It's part of what helps that scene stand out so much to me. It's great. What else is there really to talk about without just repeating what I said in my original review? I saw the storyboards for the fight, which included 2 deleted shots. One of them is nothing to write home about, but the other has Steven bubbling away these animals, which I wish we got to see so that his kinder side could have been shown more. I like the bridge scene even less now, I guess. If it was even half as brutal as it was in the storyboards, it would have been great. But it stands out as the only part of the fight I actively dislike thanks to the stiff movements. After I went on for so long with Shadow vs Ryuko, I didn't expect to cut this segment so short, but there isn't really much new for me to say here. Despite the gap in how much I had to say about the episodes, choosing which one to rank higher was the trickiest part of this ranking for me. Prior to Link vs Cloud, this was the first instance this season where I gave 2 episodes the same score. Somehow everything else just so happened to get a different one up until now, which worried me beforehand that Steven vs Star was going to get a 6 or somehow lower than a 4. But that didn't happen, which I'm super glad about. Though I'm not super glad I didn't like it enough to give it an 8. So how about we end this segment off here and move on to a fight I actually would give that score to.
I'm not sure if it's Cloud yet. It could be anybody.
We're barely at the halfway mark and we're already starting to get into the episodes I consider great. That's a promising sign for how this season's going to stack up compared to the others. Though like with Steven vs Star, I have borderline nothing to add to this episode that I didn't already go over in its solo review with how recently it came out. There are a few things I regret not bringing up, like how they fixed the sound effects for the sword clashes at the start, how amazing the purple fire looks during the fierce deity battle and the way it adds to the atmosphere of the scene, and how this has the best edited analysis of any non-comic fight they've ever done. Batgirl vs Spider-Gwen was the first episode to remind us that the SFM team is still human and can fuck up from time to time, but it did the opposite for Nick by showing his editing in Bucky vs Jason wasn't just a fluke, and started his streak of spectacularly edited episodes that has still not been broken to this day. Other than that, my review for this episode is still accurate to my current thoughts. Analysis is fun, but I wish they didn't speedrun it. The animation starts really mediocre with some awful moments, but picks up pretty quickly after the preview ends. And then from dual wield Cloud versus 4 Swords Link onwards, we're back to the SFM team's usual output of quality. The sword fighting's well done, it uses pretty much every weapon they mention for Link in his analysis. There are a ton of funny jokes, the death is great, the track fits the fight nicely, and we have one of the best transformation sequences Death Battle has ever done. If the entire animation was as good as the latter half, then this would be a contender for number 2 easily. But this is still a pretty great episode as is. Choosing between this and the next spot for the bronze medal was a tricky decision to make, since it came down to whether the peaks here were enough to make up for the episode's shortcomings and surpass one that was just consistently pretty great all throughout. And while it fell ever so short of ranking in the top 3, I don't want to undersell just how good this episode is. It just isn't one I have anything new to say about yet. We still don't even know if it's Cloud, by the way.
White was not
I wanted Heihachi vs Geese to be like whichever one of the Ryu fights that ended up with the same animation style as. And yeah, I'd say this is basically what I wanted from a Ryu vs Scorpion-esque episode. Albeit the escalation isn't quite as well handled. Not that it was badly paced, Ryu vs Scorpion just did it that well. While it starts out slow, it really picks up after the preview ends. Heihachi's aggressive fighting style and Geese's focus on projectile spam and counters are portrayed quite well, and the amazing track just makes the action all the more exciting. I can't get enough of Kings of Iron. The techno beat is music to my ears. Well, I mean, no shit, stupid. But seriously though, it's great and gives Hearts of Light a solid run for its money in terms of my favourite track of the season. Every time I re-listen to it, I can picture the fucking phenomenal rotating shot of the two trading attacks as the camera pans out, which is still the best shot of the episode. Not like the competition was a pushover though, the death is still fucking horrifying and I love it. It's the only hand-drawn moment in the episode which just helps it stand out even more. The entire climax of the fight was pretty much exactly what I was hoping for in concept, even if they didn't go quite as far as to have a full scene of them fighting as they fell into the volcano. Also, it was pretty funny in both the animation and analysis. The animation had the running gag of them both saying predictable, which I loved, as well as Geese speaking in his trademark broken English. And the analysis, while it had some shitters like that minute-long Elon Musk tangent, had plenty of great jokes like Swan Howard to make up for it. No mention of the goose in the ceiling though, which is a little bit disappointing. And it kept my attention all the way through since I was genuinely interested to learn about both of these characters. The result even caught me by surprise. Based on what I'd heard, I was really expecting a Geese W. But this season hasn't been that predictable in regards to the winners compared to the last two. Ironic that this was one of the hardest fights to call out of the whole season so far. I'm not sure what else I can really say about this. My opinion is basically the same as when I did my original review. It's a very simple but effective episode, and in my opinion is easily the better of DJ's two fighting game episodes. Luis also showed us the work in progress shot for Geese falling into the volcano, and yeah, you know what, this is getting number 1 now.
Five Nights at Freddy's, that's where I wanna be. Five Nights at Freddy's.
I said Steven vs Star was the matchup I was most hyped for, but Poe vs Iron Fist has had the individual character I was most excited to see get covered all season. Poe is among my favourite characters ever, and I'm so glad to see everything about this episode played out the way that it did. There was fanfare in the community over him being the first animated film character to ever get used, and I saw some people even rewatch some of the Kung Fu Panda films in preparation for this episode, only to remind themselves just how much they liked this series, myself being one of those people. It was really cool to see. Iron Fist, on the other hand, clearly wasn't the one the community focused on, since Poe was a very big deal for them to use compared to their, 30th Marvel character. It would have been so easy for the episode to turn into another Mewtwo vs Shadow where they actively shit on Iron Fist, or just have it be like Machamp featuring Goro where one character is given all the spotlight. But the episode still treats both characters with an even amount of respect. Poe was still definitely the character that got focused more on in terms of reviews and reactions that I saw, but that's hardly the fault of the episode itself. But a match alone doesn't make an episode good, and this episode was ranked so high because it checks most of the boxes in terms of what I want from an episode. The action's fun and filled with a ton of references that I liked. The dialogue's really funny and well written, sold even better by the amazing voice performances. Austin Lee Matthews in particular did a practically flawless performance as Poe. The track, despite not being something I'd listen to on its own, complements the battle very nicely. It switches in tone a lot to fit with the fight more as it progresses, and my favourite bit is near the end where it starts to incorporate more melodies from the Kung Fu Panda soundtrack. The ending is full of hype moments, including the best line in the episode and the best of the really solid hand-drawn stuff. The sprite rigging is on point, the effects are nice, the analysis is entertaining, it's all just so good. I spent way longer than usual gushing over this episode in its solo review, and can you really blame me? As a Kung Fu Panda fan, there's a lot for me to love here. I have a few minor issues here or there with how a line or two were delivered and how some parts are animated, but my only big issue holding this back from a 10 out of 10 score is the fairly weak death and the aftermath to the fight. Otherwise, this is an excellent episode that I can happily rewatch over and over. But they didn't name drop Tai Lung. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Do better, Death Battle. Actually, no, yeah, I am mad about it.
I can try! All I need is the light!
Even now, I'm still in awe at how well Yoda vs King Mickey works for me. There are a couple more issues that have popped up on rewatches beyond the 3 minor gripes I had in my original review, namely the Ninja Kermit joke and whatever this shot is. But other than that, everything about this episode soars, from the action to the banter to the track to the voice acting. Everything comes together to make one of my favourite Death Battle episodes, period. And even back in my review, I didn't cover everything about it that I liked. Yoda hitting Mickey with the cane was amazing, I'm impressed they were able to work that in. Plus it's a neat reference to when Yoda met R2-D2. The camera work both times Yoda loses his lightsaber is really well done. The laugh it up fuzzball line is a reference to a line that Han has in Empire, which is really neat, and I wish I'd known about it prior to my review. Mickey does the line when Yoda does the lightning strike at the end, which I only found out after I recorded my review, which I regret not being able to include. I'm glad that's the meme they went with, because it being more subtle makes it so the ending still has the emotional weight that it deserves to have, as opposed to the Lego Yoda death sound, which would have taken me out of the moment completely. Speaking of which, yeah, I'm still not over that ending. Every line of dialogue from
The power of the Force, you have not!
onwards is more or less flawless. Whenever I rewatch this episode, I typically rewatch the ending specifically a good half dozen times at least, and it never fails to get the dopamine going. What an excellent capper to an excellent episode. The fact that characters with voices this inherently goofy were still able to deliver lines that gave me chills is a testament to how amazing the line delivery and writing are here. And I haven't even mentioned how good this scene looks visually, the effects are all really pretty. The expression work is also super well done. Mickey had the unfortunate drawback of being stuck with a permanent smile, which did look off to me at points during the previews, but they were able to work around it expertly. It made it so that the only emotions they'd be able to seamlessly pull off were happiness and anger, but they were able to hide it in the moments they needed to with different camera angles and covering it with Mickey's hands. And even some shots where they don't, they're able to make him look sad and afraid without the smile ever distracting me at all. That's really impressive. The only time I can say it looked weird to me after the preview ended was the lightning strike at the end, but that scene's meant to be really goofy anyway, so it doesn't really bother me at all. Now that Yoda vs Mickey has had some time to sink in, I can confidently say that this isn't just in my top 10 favourite episodes, it's in my top 5, and I don't plan to ever stop going back to it. This season my friends and I have all recorded our reactions to most of the episodes as we watch them, but we unfortunately were not able to do it for this one. And that sucks because I would have loved to have preserved our initial popping off at so many points during the episode. I can guarantee the highlight reel would have been twice as long as most of the other ones we've had. I can't wait to see what the SFM team cooks up next. 4 of their 5 episodes have been great, and 3 of those are in my top 10 of all time. So hopefully their next one keeps their record going strong. So, despite how I'm not looking forward to the very next episode, I am looking forward to the remainder of Season 8. With only 2 episodes so far I didn't really like, only one of which I actively disliked, compared to 6 episodes that I thought were really good at the bare minimum, the bar's been set pretty high for the rest of the season. And with a decent idea of what matches are coming up, there are some that I'm really interested to see play out. Macho Man vs Kool-Aid Man is heavily implied to be happening, which sounds fun. Cole vs Alex seems likely, and I'd love that. Galactus vs Unicron is likely going to be the larger-than-life season finale, and Dio vs Alucard is also confirmed. Hopefully they tone down the cape shit and the returners. Otherwise, I think we're on track to have one of the best Death Battle seasons of all time. And I look forward to making my ranking of the whole season. This video isn't set in stone how I'm going to rank all these episodes in that video, since my Season 7 one did change a bit between She-Ra vs Wonder Woman and Hulk vs Broly. So who knows how this list is going to change by the time the finale comes out. Even if it doesn't, I'm holding out hope that we'll get another episode that's able to dethrone Yoda vs Mickey as the best of the season. Okay, now, how do I end this? I don't have the highlight reels to fall back on this time. Batman vs Totally Not Iron Man better not be hand-drawn, I swear to God.